We are group number 7. I'm Mr. Cox, and we have
Mr. Elliott, Mr. Bradley.
okay. And we're going to do our simulation of trench warfare today for class. We'll go ahead and start off with how the trenches are being built.
This is a picture of how the trenches were built. Go ahead and take a good look because we're actually going to build our own trenches here in a minute. Number 6, the couple things just to take note of. Number 6 is a plank that they would put over because these trenches got filled with water, and without these planks, their feet would just be drenched, covered the whole time. And we'll talk about what that leads to later. And number 7 is where they actually slept. So these conditions were pretty awful in which they spent a lot of their time. So take a good look at that. We'll be building our trenches here in a second. Next slide. Here's some other things to take note of. Their trenches were usually fairly deep, about 9 meters deep. We probably can't replicate that here, but the trenches were about 3 to 6 feet wide. It was wet, smelled bad. There were dead bodies all over the place. They usually didn't move those a whole lot. There's lots of disease. Soldiers had to keep their heads down at all times. Enemy snipers across from in other trenches would constantly be surveying up the other side, looking for any sort of body part that would stick out so that they could take a shot at. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. This is an aerial view. The left side, the picture on the left side is an aerial view of the trenches. Overall, out of all the trenches, they were probably added up to be about 400 miles long total. That's about the distance from here to Amarillo, Texas. And again, if you look around you at the various name tags you have on, there are a bunch of different countries, particularly on the Allied side. A lot of countries involved in the fight. Japan was involved in World War I. Didn't send a whole lot of troops, but they were involved. Now, I'm going to give you 45 seconds. You and your group, to using the materials around you, make sure you're respectful of other people's things that are on these desks, are going to build your own trenches. Okay? So hop up in your groups. Make a trench, one on this side, one on this side. You have 45 seconds.
Work fast. The enemy is advancing.
Work quickly.
And they are clean socks. No feet have been in these socks. So the only other time they've been used is for Cub Scouts for a snowball fight. So with that, go ahead. Notice you do not want to be in the center part. The center part is the no man's land. You may get hit. All right, truce. We're going to truce. We're going to move on with describe some of the causes of the trench warfare.
When the soldiers were in the trenches, as he said, the trenches were a terrible living situation. So during the fighting, it was a big factor to keep the soldiers' feet wet, because if not, you would have the trench foot, and that pretty much made the soldiers, they couldn't move anymore because they couldn't walk. So, they had to keep their bodies clean at all time and try to dry out their socks as much as they can. And also in the trenches, like you said, the dead bodies. During close quarters, machine guns are coming. If soldier gets hit, there's really nowhere to move them. So dead soldiers would be all over and molding bodies, and that would bring the rats in, and there'd be rats all over the ground while the soldiers fighting. But also with the rats, that kind of came with the soldiers ate during World War I. That was their main source of nutrition at that time because they had no other food source to get to. So.
Now we had just experienced one truce, and at this point, this is where a lot of the military would come out, gather up their dead. There's also times when you would actually go and meet the other side. You'd introduce yourself and talk with them. There's also rumors that there's a famous soccer game that was exchanged at that point also. But, I mean, you'd actually meet the person in that other trench and then have to go back at the end of that truce and then fight with them once again. That also brings us to another aspect of trench warfare, poison gas.
Yes, poison gas was first used in World War I. It's the first instance of chemical warfare that's known. The French were actually the first ones to use it in 1914, and that particular gas was actually a non-lethal form of gas that was meant to cause sneezing fits and incapacitate their victims. Eventually it became a lethal form where they eventually introduced chlorine, mustard gas, things like that, and it became quite dangerous. It led to a lot of deaths in World War I, even long after World War I was already over. So if you have a PG in the corner of your name tag, you are affected by poison gas and you cannot participate. If you have a D, go ahead and lie down on the ground or sit down on the ground. Give me your best dead body impersonation. You are no longer with us. And Robert has modern gas mask to show us.
This gas mask came from Iraq. This was an Iraqi gas mask. I brought it back when I served on my deployment over there. But the gas mask, if you look at the picture, they haven't changed all that much. Pretty similar. It's still a mask to protect the face, and then a carbon canister. And this science people, can you tell me why we use carbon to breathe through? Filter. Yeah, it's one of the best natural filters we have on Earth to absorb those lethal gases. But yeah, 100 years and the gas mask hasn't really changed all that much. It's still the same tech it was back 100 years ago. So even the animals were protected with gas masks. You see, dogs had their own gas masks to protect them. They are vital parts of the trench warfare as well, and also with the horses.
A lot of the fighting was done in the trenches, but there was a few tactics both sides used. They would dig underneath the trenches and try to, they would shove dynamite underneath the holes that they dug and blow up the trenches underneath them. And another way, another strategy they used is they did night raids. I mean, you can't really go in this area during the day. You would get cut off by machine guns or snipers, but at night, both sides tried it, but we're going to simulate a night raid this side with America, who's going to come over when we turn off the lights and night raid this side and end the war, pretty much. So when we turn off the lights, you guys night raid us.
So hard.
When you're ready, allies. Night raid. Yeah, you go in. You hop in, go over no man's land, go into their trench. It's a night raid.
Now, unfortunately, you're doing this under the light of the moon or the projector, so the enemy is taking you out at the same time. We'll call one more truce, and we also want to introduce that there was some downtime in a lot of these situations. So poetry came up, and trench warfare art was also another thing that came about from this trench warfare. But I'll just have you take a moment to pick up the socks, and we'll round those up, and I'll read this poem. You can think about that, and then I'll have you do a Socrative code and answer a couple questions there. But in Flanders Fields, Flanders Fields, the poppies glow. Between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place in the sky, the larks still break, the birds fly. Here's heard the guns below. We are the dead, short days ago. We live for the dawn, love, now we lie. Flanders Fields. Pick up your cord, what's the snow? You from failing hands we grow. Project rejoice and I. We break faith with us who die. We shall not sleep, the poppies grow. Flanders Fields. Here's your Stockton full password to log in, and it's 2 questions. One is concerning 3 aspects that you learned from trench warfare today, and the other one is just general thoughts and feelings of soldiers who may have been in that trench warfare situation.
Mr. Cox, we're going to be out of time. Can you ask them a question? They can put it in their iAspire form.
Oh, yes. One question would be named just 3 aspects of trench warfare that you discovered today through the lesson.